Welcome to the Rebel Souls podcast, where we flip the middle finger to the status quo. I'm your host, Shelley Paxton, lifelong rebel, liberator of souls, and author of Soulbatical, a corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life. Settle in as we dive deep with badass leaders who are rebelling for what matters most in life, business, and the world at large. I'm so happy you're here. Let's get this revolution started. Before we begin, I want to share an offering from my soul to yours. If you've achieved traditional success only to realize that you're living someone else's dream, then this will start you on a profound journey toward becoming chief soul officer of your own life, just like I did. I'm gifting you a free chapter from my book, Soulbatical, a corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life. It's called Liberating from the Shackles of Should. And if you're ready to, then visit soulbatical.com to download it for free. That's SOULBBATICAL.com. Warning, side effects include intense joy and fulfillment. Hello and welcome back, my fellow rebel souls. Whoo! I have a doozy in store for you. This conversation with Nick Onken, who I had never spoken to prior to this interview, this podcast gem of a conversation. He's somebody who I followed for quite a long time as a photographer and more recently as a hat maker, because you know I love my hats. And for those of you watching the YouTube version of this, I am wearing my hat in honor of Nick, and he wore one of his most recent creations in the conversation. It's amazing. We even talk about all the inspirations that went into it. And I think the thing that really has drawn me most into his world is how he has started to tell his story of his own inner journey and his own work and his own life as a creative alchemist. And we talk about what that means. And he's a multi-hyphenate. He is this brilliant photographer who has photographed the who's who and the world's most iconic brands. I mean, the who's who from Justin Bieber to, oh my God, Tom Hanks and Usher and Jessica Alba, and then big shots in the personal development world like Tony Robbins and Lewis Howes, and we can go on and on. I mean, so many celebrities and well-known personalities in the sports space. I mean, you name it, he's probably had something to do with at least one of their photo shoots. And he has shot for some of the biggest brands on the planet, from Adidas to Nike to Coca-Cola, and for, Cosmopolitan magazine. And yeah, we're talking the shit. And as I say in the conversation, that's not why I wanted to have this conversation with him. This wasn't geeking out fandom. This was really about understanding what is creative alchemy. What work has he done? How has he done the inner work to match with the reality he wants to create, to live into his own fullest expression? How can we be thinking about that? And I love this conversation because we go all over the place. It's beautifully organic. And we touch on some really fascinating concepts. You guys know how much I love language. And that's probably the thing I geek out the most on in this episode is I love Nick's use of language and some of his concepts. So we explore things from what the hell is a creative alchemist and how can I be one, to this newer concept he has around identity alchemy. And what does that mean? And how can we really call forth our most authentic identity? And what does it mean to curate the containers in our lives to create magic? How do we, create the conditions to allow magic to happen, and what's required for that, and how does he do that on his photo shoots and in his work? And then, of course, a little bit of photography, definitely a conversation around hat making, and surprisingly for me, a deeper conversation around plant medicine and some of the journeys he's been on and what it's taught him and how it's propelled his own inner work and personal journey forward. And so he's the first person who's really gotten me more curious about plant medicine, which I've never done. And I admit I'm kind of a novice and virgin in that space. Although as I curate my tribe, I'm finding more and more people who've been on that journey. And I find myself getting more and more intrigued. Anyway, it's a small part of the conversation. The bigger part of the conversation is really hitting so many angles of like, how do we follow our own white rabbit, which is Nick's way of saying, how do we follow our own soul? And are we going to be courageous enough? Are we going to be courageous enough to follow that white rabbit and to understand our truth and our authenticity, and then honor that in the expression of it and in what we create in our outer worlds, in our outer reality? It's a really fun conversation from just a beautiful creative's perspective. And I know you guys are going to get a lot out of this. And for me, it was really fun to have a conversation with somebody who I've never met, who I have followed from afar, and feel like he's a soul brother who shares so many of the same philosophies and beliefs in his life, especially around mindset and the importance of the inner work and the fact that it's a forever journey. So he is rebelling for living life to your fullest expression. And it's beautiful to talk about and to see how that's coming to life in his own world. So enjoy, you guys. This one is yummy. All right, let's tune in. I am so excited for this conversation. I have to say, so Nick Onken is with me today. And Nick, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is one I've been looking forward to because Nick and I don't know each other than the few minutes that we've been jamming and we've been getting our hat game on for this conversation. And I said, for those of you who aren't watching, who are listening, I pulled out one of my favorite hats in celebration of Nick's hat making. And he's put on one of his most recent creations. And I promise you, we're going to get deep into that because it's one of the many facets of who Nick is in the world and his creativity and the many ways it expresses itself that I want to dive into. So Nick, I feel like because we know some of the same people, I feel like you're an old friend.
Likewise. I feel like we've known each other already.
I know. Well, the first 5 minutes of just chit-chatting was easy. So I love going with the flow. And so let me say out loud for you and for the Rebel Souls community who's tuning in right now, why I wanted to have this conversation with you. I have almost everybody who knows me, who's read my book, who's been on this journey with me for the past 4.5 years since I left Harley, knows that I have 3 passions: travel, writing, and photography. Those are my biggies. And I guess we should add hats to that since that's going to factor into this conversation, right? And it's a great common point. And so I don't remember at what point I was introduced to your photography and your work. And I absolutely love it. You know, you have shot some of the biggest celebrities, in Hollywood, in athletics, in all the spaces, even in the self-help, personal development space, like the Tony Robbins of the world. And yet that's not why I wanted to have this conversation. what I've been really intrigued by as I've followed you is more of who you be and the how you express yourself creatively and why you are able to express yourself to your fullest potential in like all these different ways. It's that kind of behind the scenes inner work that I love. It's the journey I've been on. So many of the people in my community are on the same journey. And so that's what I really want to dive into with you, right? Because it has nothing to do with the celebrity. It has to do with who you be in the world. And so you're attracting that high vibration into your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot that can be unpacked in that space, but
yeah. Well, why don't we start with this? So we're gonna unpack it. So I won't leave it that broad. Let me ask you this first. My favorite and famous question: what are you rebelling for?
What am I rebelling for? I would say, well, for a lot of things. I think the mission is to, for my mission is to help, or is to create art that inspires and empowers people to find their truest self and to be in communion with their highest self as well. So that would be one thing that I would be rebelling for. And within that, it comes rebelling against every societal construct that has been created over time. And that's something I'm really, really have been thinking about a lot lately and diving into, because you're rebelling for a grander vision, a deeper connection, a soulful journey, a meaningful existence, and all these things. And with that comes rebelling against what you've been taught your whole life and what you've been cultured to believe and what you've structurally been um cultured to think and to be in this normal society. And like, look what's happening right now. It's like there is a huge press of narrative to control people and to put people in their place so that they don't ask questions, that they don't rebel, that they just live this basic life that is, left up to the control of the higher powers that be, right?
Mm.
And so I think you can find that spark, the spark that curiosity. I call it following your white rabbit, because your white rabbit appears, and that white rabbit, if you follow it, sometimes it turns into cosmic bricks, as I like to call them. And if you don't listen to the cosmic bricks, they get bigger and bigger and bigger until you do listen. So there's that aspect of it. But yeah, I would say like those are the things I'm rebelling for in the way of rebelling against, and that.
Yeah. Well, and so, there's so much goodness in what you just said. Not only because I'm 1000% aligned to what you just said, and you and I are both believers that we are the creators of our own reality. As I've been following you, listening to you, it strikes such a deep chord with me. And to be clear, when I say one of the ahas I had when I was writing my book was that I've always been a rebel. I've always been rebelling against, which to me started to feel really limiting because it was on someone else's terms. It was giving the power to someone else. And oftentimes it was kind of like banging my head against a brick wall. And what became clear for me is that there's a lot of empowerment and energy in this concept of rebelling for, because we can do it on our terms, right? All the things that you're talking about, shedding those old narratives, those old beliefs, the constructs of what culture and religion and all the things tell us to do. And so that's why I asked the question rebel for, because I feel like there's so much power and energy in that. Do you feel that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's creating more positive narrative and language around the whole idea, right? That's why I was kind of like, well, do I say rebelling against? But I think there is an aspect of explaining what that means, right?
Yeah.
I think when you're rebelling for the greater mission, it's also good to rebel against, explain what it is, the
Yeah.
context there, right?
I totally agree. Yeah, we can set the context. So let's dive into some of the some of the language that you used, because I told you before we started recording, like, I'm a language geek. I love to create my own language. I created this idea of soulbatical. I created my own title, Chief Soul Officer. My book is filled with stuff that I make up because I love to find new ways of expressing concepts that light people up or give people language that they don't yet have to describe their experience. And so you just said two things that I want to make sure we talk about: follow the white rabbit and cosmic bricks. So, I've got a couple of other, I talk about being on a mission to liberate a billion souls. And one of the things that really struck me is your language around the swords of liberation. So three things at least, and then of course we've got to get to hats, right? So in whatever journey this takes us on, I just wanted to give you a sense for some of the things that were really lighting me up. So let's talk about follow your white rabbit, since you brought that up. Like, what does that mean? My sense from you and hearing you talk is that's what you mean. Like, I love the Alice in Wonderland reference. I'm assuming that's what that is. And I'm assuming that it's like the white rabbit is to go deep into the hole, and is the whole one's inner self. Help us understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, that the whole is the inner self. It's the calling. It's the call to the wild. It's the call to discover what's really there. And the white rabbit, your white rabbit, I should say, everyone has their white rabbit, right? And you look at Alice in Wonderland, you look at The Matrix, you look at some of these actual pop culture films that have referenced the white rabbit, especially with Alice in Wonderland, because it really is, she, like, I think the story is that she's in this wealthy family, she's getting married, she feels this call, she feels something, and then she's on the wedding day, I think it was, and she sees the white rabbit, and she chooses to follow the white rabbit, and then she goes down this hole and discovers this whole world of herself and, like, her actual inner truth. And so that's probably a big space of where I've kind of gotten that reference. Is really, it is diving down. That rabbit is your higher self calling. It's calling your soul to live and be liberated, right? It's calling your soul. It's calling you to, like, do the work to find out what that is. But most people don't want to hear it, right? Most people aren't paying attention to it. Most people are caught up in the ego side of things, in the life side of things, and, like, the hoop and the holler and the celebrity and all the stuff that this 3D world has to offer, because that's what is also controlling, right? And what's lying underneath, I believe, is an awakening process. And I don't, it comes when it comes, right? For me, it came a few years back, between a breakup and my business struggling and a lot of different things. And that took me down a whole dark night of the soul. And that was my cosmic brick, right? And the cosmic bricks they'll start raining. A lot of people had a lot of cosmic bricks this last year. I mean, COVID was definitely...
hell yes. A massive cosmic brick.
Yeah, and everybody had them in their different ways of the things that they were dealing with. And, some people chose to drink themselves silly, and then other people utilized the time as a space, as a way to go inward and dive deeper and figure out more of who they are. And that's the thing, is, like, when you don't listen to the cosmic bricks, they get bigger and they get bigger until you do listen. And sometimes they get bigger and bigger, and it ends up being like car crashes and injuries and disease and cancer and all these different things that, if you're not listening, then they come and hit you. So I think the key is to, when you hear those, when the call is there, when your white rabbit jumps across your room or your computer screen or whatever it is, follow that curiosity, get curious about it, and start digging. For me, that was just like that was the start of the process. And I'm still, it's a never ending rabbit hole that you keep going down. And I think the thing is integrating it into daily life. For me, plant medicine has been really huge in that process. Mushrooms particularly have been a favorite of mine, which is why you actually see the reference on the hat logo.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So we're looking at a white rabbit on the inside of the hat of Nick's latest creation. For those of you who are listening, that is awesome. Are you putting that in all hats?
Yeah. So this is the liner now.
Okay. I love that. So that will be the liner of my new hat when we talk about my new hat.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So like with the hats, that's what's like I'm putting this philosophy into all of the hats, into the brand, and that's kind of the brand story as well, is this whole finding your inner truth, doing what lights you up, rebelling against the norm, or rebelling for a greater good and a greater holistic, joyful, vibrant, colorful life.
You know what? I love that you said colorful, because that's the other thing that really strikes me when I've listened to you in the past, and I was thinking like, oh my God, Nick, you're rebelling for living in full color, people living into their highest, most beautiful expression. And it's just so cool.
Thank you. Yeah. And that is another piece of what I'm rebelling for, is, wanting to see other people live their most colorful, fully expressed life. And I feel like I'm still doing work to get to my fullest expression, because that's just like, that's the process.
I love that you're living it out loud. So this is a reflection as somebody who has been on this journey for 4.5 years. I agree with you. It's a never ending journey, right? Because we're going to constantly be called to get outside of our comfort zone and play a bigger game and live an even fuller expression with more of those vibrant colors. I believe that there isn't a there. This is an ongoing process. And, I guess a couple of things I want, because I'm watching you and even how your podcast has evolved. Like I could see from last year to this year, how you're kind of like fine tuning it to really be you. You're actually calling it Onken Radio. It seems to me that you're doing some work to dial in your expression of yourself. And I don't mean rein in, I mean, just dial in, like, what is that frequency? What are those colors? What is that vibration? And so I kind of want to back up for a second and talk about, you call yourself a creative alchemist. And I feel like that is intertwined in everything that we're talking about right now. So can you talk about what that means? Because it feels like a springboard into all the other yummy stuff we want to get into.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because over the last, I don't know, say like probably 8 years, I've been doing photography for a good 15 years. And that became my identity. And that was like, I was doing all these commercial stuff, commercial photography and celebrities and magazines and all this stuff. And then that kind of shifted, that business started to struggle because the industry had shifted a lot. And then I started playing with other mediums. You can see that, well, you can see the
people
me,
who are watching the YouTube will. So we will definitely publish the video of this. Yeah, keep going.
So I started playing around with hand-drawn typography, and then, because I was a graphic designer for 5 years before I was a photographer, and then I started painting these paintings, and I started painting murals, and then I was painting all kinds of different things, and then I started getting into hats like a few years ago, and playing around with those, and it's just I started diving in and exploring all these different mediums, and over the last couple of years, I've been like trying to figure out, how do I kind of create this umbrella around everything that I do. So it feels cohesive. People understand it. And it was just even through quarantine last year that I kind of came up with the idea of being a creative alchemist, which is kind of the idea. It's the idea of mixing all kinds of things together under one kind of aesthetic and mission and vision, because I do love doing all these different things. I love the variety of being able to sit here and make hats and then go off and travel and do photo shoots for a week, and then do an occasional mural here and there. And now I'm getting into designing co-designing, doing collaborations with other clothing brands and designing some of those things. And it's just this kind of ongoing creative space of play. And then you mix all the creative outlets with the inner alchemy. And that's also the other piece of being creative alchemist, is going inward and utilizing the journey that I'm going on, and the perspectives that I'm generating, and the new narratives, and all the, I'm learning a lot. I'm reading a lot of books, and I'm taking different courses. And it's like, how does like all the stuff that I'm learning and alchemizing coming out in the artwork? And you can see that obviously like in the hat brand, or I was saying, like, that's the extension, right,
Yeah.
of the alchemy that's happening inside. So the creative alchemist is what I've got, the identity that I've got for now, and which I really enjoy. And I think it's starting to all come together. And that's the same with the podcast. It was like, okay, I used to have this brand called Neon, and it was great. I just didn't have the capacity to like manage it and keep it going and doing its thing. So it was like, and as I am helping people build their personal brands now through photography and design and even strategy with the right partners and things like that, well, I was like, okay, I got to like do this for myself. I've got to start consolidating everything, and just it creates less, moving parts. I can start to bring everything all together. And
And
that's
it
the
has
heart of
greater
the creative
impact.
alchemy.
Yeah, 100%. And I love your, a couple things that are landing with me. I love your ownership of this idea of alchemy, because that's such a powerful concept. Like this, in medieval days, right? It was like the transmutation of, metals into gold, other metals into gold. And we think about it as this like magical process of transformation. And I love how you're kind of owning that as part of who you are and how you show up and what you do in the world, because it isn't limited to any one medium. And I think we can all think about, how do we own the alchemy for ourselves? And haven't you started to do some work around this, like identity alchemy? Did I hear you talk about that recently?
Yeah, I mean, so what's interesting too is that my friend told me, he studies, does shadow work for men primarily, and he was saying that Carl Jung is one of the people who kind of said the idea of alchemy comes through alchemizing your shadow
Oh,
work, doing shadow work and alchemizing it, which is super fascinating. So that's also, so I'm learning all these different things, and like alchemy, there's a lot of alchemy happening, a lot of people identifying with alchemy these days. And I think it's great. And I think for me, it is a huge piece of what I'm doing, because the creativity comes from the inner alchemy, as far as I'm concerned. Now, identity alchemy is a whole nother program that I'm working on and starting to take ownership of as well. And that's like, it is the idea of, creating inner alchemy that extends into the outer personal brand, right? And I think the
mm,
most strongest personal brands are the ones that are congruent from the inside out. And so the identity alchemy process is one of, the first phase is deconstruction or deconstruct. The second is curate. And the third piece is become, right? So
mm.
you got to start with the deconstruction of who you are, the deconstruction of your belief systems, your narratives, um, your shadows, and the things that, and I feel like this could be in and of itself its own program, just the deconstruction phase of it, because this is where the plant medicine comes in. This is where personal development work comes in. This is where the deeper dive down the spiritual rabbit hole comes in,
Yep.
is the deconstruction phase. And then you get to the curation stage. And this is where you're curating in terms of a personal brand. You're curating who you want to be in the world, right? You're curating everything from like your mission, your message, your kind of who you want to be, who you want to emulate, things like that.
And making the choice to live into that, right? Because I think that's where a lot of us sort of fall down, is like, I kind of knew I wasn't living my truth, but I was also choosing not to follow the white rabbit, not to live into the truth. So I think there's a lot of helping people get conscious around the choice and how they can be the creator of their reality in that phase, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the third piece of the becoming, right? You become that. You not only be that in the world and choose to become that in the world and choose to create this reality in the world, but you're also creating assets around that, visual assets from photography, video, design around that into your personal brand, and then creating that congruence. So it's so much of the inner alchemy, and then like the outside piece is like, okay, yeah, let's like go and like hire the right people and tell that story. But the first two pieces is like actually deconstructing and curating, creating who that is and stepping into it. So
I love that. And I mean, I talk about the entire soulbatical journey being from the inside out. And I think that's the one of the things I'm rebelling for right now is this idea of rebel leadership that looks very different than it has in the past, because it starts from the inside out. It cares about radical self-commitment. It cares about doing that work so we can express, our leadership can even be more powerful in its full vibrant expression, if you will. And so, and I've always said like soulbatical is, I thought soulbatical at the time when I left Harley meant leaving your job. And I have since realized that it's about finding yourself and doing this work so that we can live our truth and make a big freaking impact in our lives and the world. Right. Yeah. And that's what identity alchemy feels like to me. I think that's why I'm like resonating with it.
Yeah. What it is, it's finding your truth and then creating from that truth, right? Creating your new reality from the truth that you find. But that takes deconstruction, that takes a bit of curation, and then it takes the becoming, the stepping into the creation of that identity. Yeah.
And I've been go ahead.
Oh no, we're always constantly shape-shifting our identities. It's not just a one-time thing. It's like, I've shape-shifted many, many identities throughout my lifetime and career and all that stuff. And so it is an ongoing process. Absolutely.
100%. And we have to commit to it being an ongoing process, right? I don't like snakes, but the image that I just got was like the snake shedding its skin. Like we are constantly in that process of evolution. Yeah, it feels very real.
I've evolved so many times over the last year. I'm like completely different than I was last year, stepping into quarantine in March last year.
Amen to that, brother. And here's the thing, what I love, and I said this at the beginning, and I just want to say it again, like, you inspire me to live that evolution out loud. You inspire me to live that kind of inner work and creative and identity alchemy out loud, because you're helping the rest of us on this journey by saying, guys, I'm wrestling with this stuff every single day. And you're helping us understand your own process so we can, cannonball into the deep end ourselves.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. So you used this word, one of my, language, and you use the word curating a lot. And I'm a huge fan of that word because I believe that's also, congruous, however you say that word, with choice. Right. Congruent. So congruent. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Congruent with choice. So I love this idea. And I think I recently heard you talk about curating our containers. Did you recently do a podcast episode on this?
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the most recent ones.
Okay. I want to talk about this because this idea of curating our containers. So it's not only doing this inner work, and then aligning it with how we express ourselves outwards. It's also curating the containers around us, because I think so many of us could easily say, well, I've done the work and now all I feel around me is like, resistance, or my reality isn't supporting my who I'm becoming or whatever. The next step feels like maybe it's part of this becoming step to curate the containers around you. So I just wanted to hear you speak to that a little bit, and maybe even give examples of how you curate your own containers in your own life.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that, there's so many different containers of life to curate. You have your whole life of the container, right? Like that's one huge container, which is your perspectives,
It's like
your
the
thought
meta container.
processes, the meta container, right? And you're like, okay, well, I learned this years and years ago. It was kind of like I stemmed from Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Workweek book of like the idea of designing your life. Right, we have the power to choose to create our lives and create our realities, and that's all about the thought process. And it's like, and that in and of itself is like curating the thoughts that you're thinking and also believing and putting emotion behind, because the intentions of our thoughts mixed with high vibrational emotion is what we end up manifesting into our lives. So that's one container. So we can cut down into like other smaller containers, because like the actual, say like your apartment or your house, creating a container that inspires you to live the life that you want to live. We are creatures of ease and of easiness. So I think one of the spaces is to like intentionally curate your space so that you do the things subconsciously that you want yourself to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for me, it's like I have these paintings that say joy and intention and love right behind me, and that's part of that, and gratitude, and part of that is the the curation on my own behalf of creating a space that like makes me want to feel a certain way.
Yes.
And then also, I also have I have a big New York apartment, but it's small, but it's big for New York. So everything in here is kind of just set up. Like I've got my magic table, which is there, and I meditate in front of this table every day. And I've got incense, I've got books, I've got journals, I've got candles, magic crystal balls, and things like that. And that also is a curation of that space. I have my workout station like right here next to me, so that it is right there in front of me. So it's like I get up in the morning and it's just natural for me to jump in and do that. I have my podcasting station right here, which we're talking on. It's like also in the living room. And then I go downstairs and I notice this, I do this like a lot too. So I have my hat working station right next to my computer, and I have a couple different computers, and I set it up in that space so that I'm automatically going to it, because it's like sitting right in front of me. And I have this problem too, is if something's not in front of me, then I don't end up using it. So I've got to create, it's like intentionally curating the space so that when you're just flowing, that happens. So when I'm doing photo, and I had this thing called create your moments, which is this hashtag that I've been using for years. And it kind of came through the idea of the way that I do my photo shoots. It's like I intentionally curate the container. So, and that's kind of working in the masculine energy. So I'm pulling in the props, the styling, the wardrobe, the talent, the locations, lighting, hair and makeup, all that stuff. And so choosing what I want that to be. And then in the moment when we actually get, everything's in place, I'll work with the talent and we'll just like flow with the magic within that container.
Oh,
Right?
that's the feminine. That's the
So the
juicy.
feminine side,
Yeah.
right? So your container is your masculine, and the flow and the magic is the feminine that happens inside. So if you're constantly creating containers for yourself to flow within, that's where the beauty and the magic happens. That's where the beauty of life happens. And this is like, plant medicine journeys are the same way. Is like you go into it with intention, and then that intention guides the flow of the journey and guides the flow of the medicine. And I feel like all of life is that. So say, another analogy too is like curating your friends and curating the people that you hang out with, because the people you hang out with, you start to mirror those people. So, think about curating who you're spending your time with, and who is not only bringing you value, but like how much value are you bringing to that relationship as well? Because it's it can't be a one-sided thing. So in any relationship, what are you bringing to the table, I think is huge. So think about everything in curating how you want things to flow in your life.
Yeah. And curating. So it's really calling forward your highest self and your fullest potential. That's what I'm hearing you say. And for your subjects as well, I imagine, 'cause one of my questions was, how do you curate this photography container? And you just answered that question so beautifully. I'm really curious. How do you work with your subjects in a way that you can help them call their highest self and their just most genuine, authentic, relaxed self into the space, into that container?
Yeah, I mean, I think that starts with the prep work as well. So we start working on the container in the beginning. So I have like an intake form and ask them questions, and then the second step is the photo shoot design consult call, where we get on the phone, we talk about the answers to their questions, and we craft the creative concepts around that, right? We're building the container, we're like designing the container. And then the photo shoot day, the container, once we set the container, then we just get in there and flow. And then the magic is what is me bringing my energy, the energy that I bring to the table, as well as making sure, I have a whole photo shoot tips sheet, making sure the talent has they haven't had enough rest the night before, and they've like sat down and like grounded themselves, and all these different things, right? So we're both bringing our energies to the table. And then when we're in the moment, I think there's also a piece of surrender to the divine intelligence, and opening that channel so that it flows. But then, for me, when I'm working with my subjects, so much of it is about me being my fully expressed self, me giving positive reinforcement, I bring music all the time, and that just sets a tone and a vibe and movement and action, and puts people at ease. And I also put people at ease when I'm just as who I am and who I am in the interaction, because I want this person to feel the best that they can during the shoot, right? And the more that I push them to express, and even the more, and a lot of times that it comes down to me demonstrating what I want them to do, and acting ridiculous and doing
getting goofy, I imagine. Totally.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because as I've been more in front of the camera as well, just as I built my own personal brand, I've learned so much about being behind the camera, because it's super awkward if a photographer doesn't know what they're doing, if they don't know if they're not giving direction, they're not they're fumbling with their camera, they're doing all these different things. Like, I noticed that. And so I noticed that because I want to be able to shift that in my own photographer game when I'm working with people. So
it seems like there's a theme in here. The word I just wrote down is vulnerability, right? Because there's a vulnerability in the way that you've been telling your own story and starting to communicate your own personal journey and brand. And I know from personal experience, certainly not at the celebrity level with a Nick Onken, but being in front of the camera, which I will say, I love this kind of in front of the camera moment. You asked me to be on a photo shoot as the subject of that photo shoot, and I'm immediately in my most awkward self and my most awkward space, because what I have realized in the last couple that I've done is there is just this beautiful vulnerability that's required in bringing your genuine self and being willing to kind of get goofy and dance to the music and do the things where you're like, oh my God, these are only the things I do when no one is watching, right? So What's your take? I mean, how do you think about the importance of vulnerability in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's hugely important. I mean, vulnerability across the table, not just in photography, but in who you are online. And I think the more that you can share your process and your journey, um, in a way that's, I think, constructive versus emotional dumping. I think there's a line there is highly important. And I'm working on that myself. Like I've been breaking down my own barriers of being more and
Yeah.
more vulnerable. And, I grew up with a lot of judgment in my family. So and apparently, according to the gene keys, I have a judgment in my sixth line, or my sixth line is judgment as well, which I don't know if you've poured into the gene keys, but it's
No,
amazing.
I haven't. Oh,
And
can you
so that is
explain what that?
something.
Can you explain what that is? Because I don't even know what the gene keys are, and it feels like something I want to dive into.
Oh my God. The gene keys are amazing. It's this guy Richard Rudd who basically channeled the whole book, and it's this thick, but it's kind of a reference guide. So you can go to genekeys.com and take the test, and it gives you you have to know your time of birth and place and all that stuff, and it
Oh,
gives
so it's like
you
doing human design
all
when you have to
of
put in all that input.
yeah. So it's basically like the poetic version of human design. It's
Nice.
if you like words, his
Oh.
words drip with poetic wisdom. It's so amazing. And I'll send you this album that he did with Future Primitive. It's so good. It's so good. And so he does like these transmissions and meditations that you can find online, along with, then he has the book as well. And like when you take the test, you get your actual gene key holographic profile. And
Ooh.
then you can use that to look up you can use the book to look up your holographic profile and read those. I mean, the book is just really good in general. You can just kind of go through it whenever you want to, or pick it up and open it and listen to it, or just read like a couple pages. And it's so profound, and it calibrates on a really, really high frequency, so that
Ooh.
when you're just reading it, you feel the frequency. It's
Yeah.
really bizarre. It's really bizarre. And that's a whole other thing. I was looking at I don't know if you know who David R. Hawkins is.
Mm-mm.
He wrote the book Power versus Force and Letting Go.
Oh,
Both.
well, that is a lesson I need. You're giving me all kinds of gifts and what I need to hear in this moment. No coincidence, of course.
Absolutely. Letting Go is amazing. I've read that one a couple times. But he has a whole scale of emotional frequency, just like Joe Dispenza, in a
Yep.
certain sense. I don't know if you dove into like emotional vibrational frequencies, but
Yeah.
every emotion it vibrates on a scale, right? And so like you get to level with David R. Hawkins, it's like level 200, which is just you're getting past guilt, shame, and fear, like into fear, and then you're getting into like ownership, and then all the way up into 1,000, which is like enlightenment and love. And so we're
Yeah.
all calibrating at a certain frequency. And the idea, obviously, the alchemy is to alchemize to raise your frequency. And this is actually like tangible knowledge, right? Like everybody says like, raise your vibration and your frequency. What does that even mean, right?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
actually like a good description of like what that means. And your frequency is based off of your emotions and like where you're vibrating at. So when you get down into like fear, shame, guilt, and all that, that's the stuff that when it gets lot and you don't pass that through your body, it gets stuck in your body. And that's where disease comes from.
And it pulls you down. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it festers inside of your body. And
Yeah.
that's where sickness comes from. So there's the whole philosophy of like, if you read Joe Dispenza's work, you can heal your body with your mind. Because his work is amazing. It's changed my life. And it's so powerful in that respect of your belief systems and your emotional frequencies and all that.
This is lighting me up for 1,000 reasons. And the one that I wanted to say out loud is when I did kind of coach training, I chose the specific training I went through because their philosophy is coaching around energy. And everything is energy. Money is an exchange of energy, right? We are all energy. And so the founder of this particular program has the 7 levels of energy, and they mirror exactly what you were just describing around like power versus force, like around all of that. It's like, was it that or the gene keys that were I think I just confused everything.
Well, power versus force and letting go has more the scale of energy.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the same thing. And it was like the lower levels of energy are the catabolic energy, like the unsustainable, ultimately destructive energy, worry, fear, doubt, shame, guilt, all the things you were just talking about. And I always think about those as like the sandbags that hold your hot air balloon on the ground instead of what, like, and once we're starting to let go of that and process and release that energy, our hot air balloon can start to rise. And in this case, it's like to level 7 is sort of the, sort of the all being energy, what you described as like level 1,000 on that scale. But it's really a beautiful way to think about life and understand when you're stuck in that energy, and then what tools do you need to release that energy so you can rise, raise your vibration very literally again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Soul yet?
I subscribed to Disney Plus only to watch that movie.
Yeah, that movie was amazing, but it's so true. And there's so many, it's like you have the lost souls, and it's like they've been clouded by their thoughts of their negative thought world so much that it takes, big cosmic bricks to get them out of it, or the help of people. And there's so many like great metaphors in that movie. I think it's such a beautiful movie.
Oh, I mean, just this must have, I'm guessing that this really sparked with you, but just understanding like creative flow, like when you're in that flow, you're connected to source, you're connected to the divine, like even just how they portrayed all of that, I thought was so profound.
Oh, so good. It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's funny because I watched that, and a week later I came back home on New Year's Day and did like this mushroom journey, and it was so fascinating to like go through this mushroom journey, especially with that kind of in my subconscious. And this journey was one of the most profound journeys I've had, because it just had all these illustrations, and I was getting like these just straight direct downloads of information, and it was showing me like it was this like knowledge by embodiment and experience versus knowledge by description. So you could watch the movie Soul and be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then like when you get embodied knowledge, and this guy, I don't know if you know of Ken Wilber.
I've heard of Ken Wilber. Yeah.
Yeah, he has a thing called integral theory, and he talks about, one of the things he talks about within that is knowledge by description and knowledge by experience. And knowledge by experience is completely different, because you're actually like, it gets embodied, it gets imprinted on and into who you are, versus like head knowledge of, yeah, I understand this concept, but what is it actually like to live it out and embody it is a whole different thing. And so this mushroom journey was like huge in that respect for me.
So I'm curious what's shifted in your world, in your being, even in your creative expression since that particular mushroom journey.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because it was just, I think it just tapped me into connecting with the divine on a deeper level in my creativity, and like clearing the channel. So it was also telling me that like, all of my previous plant medicine journeys up until this one have really been about cleaning the spacesuit, like going in there and chiseling. It's like doing deep gum treatment, right? Like gum work. That you're like, I had to do that a few years ago, and it was just like, it was so painful. And they had to go out and get the gunk out and just clear it, and so they would heal, right? And that's what, like, we need to heal our earth suits, and we need to like clear. We also have to detach ourselves from the spacesuit, from the ego of the spacesuit. We are not the spacesuit. We are just having a human experience, right? We're a soul or a cosmic intelligence having this human experience
in our human suit, right? So you call what I call a human suit, you call a spacesuit. That's like the soul in our body, right?
Yeah, human suit, spacesuit, meat suit. Avatar, all the things, and the idea that we are not any of that.
Yeah.
We're just having an experience in this element. And so that was a big piece of it. But I think to get really clear the channel, like, you got to go in and do some super deep subconscious work. And that's what it was showing me. And then now it was like it was like, now we're giving you a system upgrade. and it was wild. Like this whole journey, it was mushroom journeys are the best.
Okay, you're really inspiring me. I will admit that I'm a total plant medicine novice. And I've always said when I feel called, I have no issue. I'm not opposed to doing it. In fact, I'm very intrigued by it, but I hadn't yet felt called to do mushrooms or, well, except for, way back in the day before it was like the hallucinogenic, kind of like beautiful journey that you're describing, or ayahuasca. And based on the people as I'm curating the container of my tribe, including people like you who I'm bringing onto Rebel Souls to have these conversations, I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to wanting to bring that experience into my world. So I may follow up with you to get a few pointers on.
Yeah, absolutely. And one book I'd highly recommend is called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan.
Ooh.
And Michael Pollan's a scientific food journalist. So he got
I love his work, but I've never read this book. I absolutely love his work.
This book changed my mind, literally changed my mind, because I grew up with the whole idea that drugs are bad, yada, yada, yada. And obviously there's a difference between drugs and plant medicine. Plant medicine heals. Plant medicine, that's why they're psilocybin is being so highly shown now, because it's treating depression, PTSD, anxiety, addiction, all these things. And psilocybin is what's in mushrooms.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of new research going on. And that book talks about, not only it gives the history, the research of psychedelics, but then it has his, firsthand experience. He interviews like 15 to 20 different facilitators for each medicine, and then he chooses to do one or two journeys with each medicine, and then he gives his firsthand account of each one. And then the third part of the book is all the new neuroscience around.
Oh, I love that. And this is the stuff that Tim Ferriss is investing heavily in now, because I follow you. I love that you brought up the 4-Hour Work Week. And that was one of the books that was very influential early on in my journey. And then Tribe of Mentors after that is just like, I just love that philosophy. Because again, curating your tribe, who do you want to learn for? Who is in that space that's aligned with who you're becoming and who you want to become. Right. And he's I've listened to him talk about this a lot. I'm going to put that book in the show notes and in my Amazon cart.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I always recommend that one because it's so informative, and it comes at it from a very skeptical scientific perspective, which I needed to be able to be like, oh, this makes a whole lot of sense. Now I want to try everything.
Yeah. And so I'm curious about the expression of this then. And then I kind of want to, I think the bridge to our hat conversation is going to be around magic, because magic is another like beautiful golden thread in everything I hear you talk about. And it's really part of the essence of what you curate in the world, or what you curate a container to allow magic to happen. And magic is such a trust and surrender process. Right. And so, I forget where I was going with that, but I guess I want to have a conversation around a little bit of like magic and the role it plays in your life. And then I noticed, like, as I look at your hats, which I'm totally obsessed with, and we're going to talk about my pre-order in a moment, because I want to like start talking about like what this hat is going to be. But just talk to me about magic and how you make space for it, because trust and surrender is a big part of magic, at least in the way I think about it. And trust and surrender is so fucking hard. I struggle with it every day.
Yeah. I mean, that is the key, is trust and surrender. Magic for me is, I mean, how to describe it? It's everything that is, it's like that resonance. It's a tuning, like you feel this like high vibrational frequency of energy and emotion, which comes through surrendering to life, and the more you surrender to life, the more magical things happen. The synchronicities start happening. things just start falling into place.
Yeah.
And, the more we try to control things, at least I've noticed, has really had, the less magic happens, right? Like the more things tend to fall apart, or the more things to just like, I think being less rigid and surrendering to what life has to offer becomes even more beautiful, right? It is that beauty. And I'll send you the album with the Richard Rudd, because the first song is called Beauty. And it's like, it talks about so much of like, the more that we can surrender and see the beauty in everything, the more magic happens, the more beautiful life becomes. And it's like going back to soul, right? Like the magic was when the little acorn leaf fell into his hands and realized that the gift is life. The gift is the magic of life, right? And so for me, I love, playing with magic of energetics, the magic of alchemy. Magic comes when you can alchemize all the things that you're holding on to be able to let go and surrender. Going to plant medicine, the more you surrender, the more beautiful that journey becomes. But some people will like hold on for dear life and hold on to this reality because it's all they know. It's like, and it's hard, it takes practice, just as well as life takes, like surrendering in life takes practice, and letting go. And when things don't go our way, it's like, okay, what's the gift in this? What's the beauty in this? That's where the magic happens, when you shift your perspectives and you see things as a gift. And, I had this crazy relationship a few years back, and it was like, it pushed me into a huge dark night of the soul. But the gift, that relationship was a gift. I would be where I'm at right now, right here today, if it wasn't for that relationship.
Yeah.
And so everything happens for our own growth. We just have to see that, right? And we can see that. That's where the magic happens. And then we can go into like the further magic of like energetics and bending spoons and shit like that, which I want to like get into at some point. I'm like, there's this class, my friend sent me this class. It's like actually how you can like move shit with your mind and bend energy and stuff like that, which is kind of like the next level of magic that I want to play around with.
This, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. The next expression of Nick Onken's creativity is bending spoons and moving shit with his mind. I love that.
I mean, maybe I'll just make hats with my mind. I'll just like look at it and it'll just like start like assembling without me even having to do anything.
Totally. Okay. And now that we're on the topic of hats, however it's getting made, I know
thought I'd
for
bring
sure.
That segue in,
I know. Well done, my friend. Thank you. Now I get to follow your lead. Like, let's follow the white rabbit of hats, especially since it's your new lining. I love it. So I told you in our intro through our mutual friend Bronwyn, who was on the podcast and is a dear friend of both of ours, that, not the least of which why I love following you is because of your hat obsession, which has now become part of your business. And that like one of the cosmic brick moments during COVID for you that got you going way deeper into hat making?
It just, part of it was just like, I couldn't, all photo shoots were canceled for like 4 months. And then when people started to feel comfortable spending money, they started like ordering hats. And so I did a whole bunch of them, and quite a few of them through a little period of time when I was home. And it's just evolved over the last couple of years in terms of like all the stuff that I've been doing, the sourcing, the materials, all the things, it's a learning process. Absolutely. And, I enjoy creating magical creations for people and with people, and that has an essence of them, but also an essence of me. And it's definitely a very collaborative process.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about that process. So consider this the official pre-order for the Shelley Paxton Onken White Rabbit hat. And we'll talk about all the details of like shape and color and all that stuff offline. However, what I'm really curious about is, as I've followed you on Onken Hats, and as I've seen some of these bespoke creations, like they are pieces of art, my friend. I mean, it's blowing me away, not just because I'm obsessed with hats, but because I can understand as you're describing them and as I see the person wearing them, that it is reflective of who they are. So I'm really curious, and yet has you in it and always has, magic and crystals and high vibration and all these elements that are so clearly Nick in the fabric of what you're creating, quite literally. So what is that process of you kind of extracting the essence of, maybe me in this case, to understand, like, where do I want to go in this collaboration and what is going to inform this particular creation?
Yeah. I think part of it is really kind of, I'll ask my clients, what are some different themes or symbols that are meaningful to you? That's like a good place to start. And then I can kind of take that and translate that into how I would see that, and sometimes that just takes a little bit of research and thinking, and maybe it's hand stitched writing of a favorite word on the hat or a brim. Like I just did one for this guy, Kyle Gray. I don't know who, he's got a few like Oracle card decks and stuff like that. And he was like, he wanted we put Pisces and Orion in the constellations in the stars underneath the brim. So I'll like burn the stars into the brim. So that was like, those are his signs. So I put those in there. And then, he wanted to do something super all white, very simple. And then kind of at the end, he's like, what do you think about adding the mantra I am light onto it? So then I was like, yeah. So I hand painted it in white on the brim, which looked really cool. So it's definitely a collaborative process. So a lot of it's taking ideas from you and then translating that into my style of expression. So and it's different, and I've been experimenting with different techniques and mediums with in applications of the hat, and so it's kind of ever evolving as well. And so I'm able to do different things in translating that. And a lot of times, sometimes I'll have somebody, if they, I'll have them like go through the hat Instagram, and then like send me some of the ones that they love and the elements that they love on it, just to get an idea of what they're vibing on. Yeah. So, cause like I want to create something that, you're excited to rock and wear out.
Totally. Right? And we become ambassadors for you.
Totally. And I've had people design stuff for me, and I was kind of like, yeah, it's cool, but I don't know if it was really want it. But maybe it's because I'm a stronger creative, and there's things that I like in a certain way. So it's always different. It's a different dynamic. Some people are just like, I don't know, make whatever you want. I like it. I want a black felt. Great. Okay, cool.
And then go for it. Tell me the story of the one you said, the one you're wearing right now, for anybody who's watching us on live on film, or not live, but on YouTube. So I love this. You said this is your most recent creation, and this was post Mushroom Journey.
This is post Mushroom Journey, but I just got inspired by the new Louis Vuitton men's campaign, actually. And there's some like really cool hats in there, but this one I hand shaped the crown. So this is all just done by hand. There's no blocks, because usually you use a block with a shape on it. And then this is, I had some stitches here, and then I wanted like a higher wrap for the crown. So I double wrapped this Pendleton strip, and then, put the selenite over the. And
that's one of your signature, right? The selenite crystal.
Yeah. The selenite's a signature of mine. It's kind of like my staple. I put it on all the hats, all the custom hats anyways. And then I had this pin for a while, but obviously the mushroom. And then this is like, I cut a little heart out of the brim.
Oh, I love that.
Which you can see. And then I just kind of like burned the edges. I didn't put any stars into this one, but it's always, I think the hats I make for myself are kind of like the prototypes in terms of like trying different things. I haven't done this type of shape before, so I wanted to try, hand shaping it to kind of a more, I don't know, hobo chic look.
Yeah, and a more organic look, right, than a very structured hat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Tell me about, I noticed and this is probably going to be my last question, save for one, because we have to exchange some wanderlust favorite places, because we're both like world travelers and geek out on that. But tell me about the symbolism of the cards. I see the Queen of Hearts and the Ace of Hearts and the King of Hearts in a lot of what you create.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've put them in a few different hats, and my friend 11, who is I've made a few hats for them, and they've gone through, went through a transition into non-binary recently.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting because I made a hat that was like had the king and the queen, right? Because non-binary is actually balanced energy.
It's beautiful.
And so the balance of king and queen energy, I put the king of hearts in some hats before. It's just like, the whole idea of a king, a loving king energy, and the world of masculine, feminine archetypes.
And the heart energy, I imagine, because I noticed they're always hearts, and I loved that.
Yeah, I think putting heart energy, love energy on there is also a big thing. So,
nice.
the world is an oyster in terms of what we can create. And it's, sometimes I use cards, sometimes I use stars, sometimes I put mushrooms on it. Sometimes it's just like everything is like a different, inspiration and time of play. I'm playing with some tie-dye stuff right now. So
cool.
I've been I'm spraying some of the hats with tie-dye colors, which is kind of fun.
That's super fun. And I love that we can have a piece. Like, I'm an accessories girl, right? Like, I always have my cuffs on. I always have a big ring on. I love my hats. And these are part of my expression in the world. It's part of my very unique creative expression. I would say it's part of my identity alchemy. And I love the idea that I could have a hat that even more so is that expression of my essence and who I am. So that feels like a nice way to bring this home. So tell me, where you've traveled all over the world, shooting amazing people. I mean, so I think we share this wanderlust travel gene. I'm curious, like, do you have a favorite place or a place where you feel like it just truly brings out the magic in you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different places. I have different favorite places for different reasons. So adventure-wise, Antarctica was one of my favorite places, and then Iceland as well, and Finnish Lapland, all cold places, but very just uniquely magical in and of themselves. I mean, Antarctica, you get to hang out with penguins and watch them run around, and there's some of those fascinating animals on the planet, in my opinion. Finnish Lapland was epically amazing, and just this winter wonderland. It's where they have reindeer up there, and that's where the Santa Claus story stems from, because of the Amanita muscaria mushroom. There's a whole story behind that, which I find super fascinating. God, where else? Japan, Tokyo is one of my favorite cities. So uniquely bizarre yet amazing. Tibet was also an amazing place to go. I'm rattling off a lot here, but and then warmer climates, the Greek islands are some of my favorites. I love Tulum as well. Tulum's such a uniquely
gorgeous,
a magical place. And Morocco, Marrakesh. Oh, such a great place.
Amazing. I have to tell you, one of my favorite shoots of yours was with Lewis Howes in Istanbul.
Yes, that was a good one.
I lived in Turkey, in Istanbul, for 4 years before I moved to New York City. Yeah. And I'm married a Turk who I've since divorced, but Turkey is a place that is deep, deep, deep in my heart, and the magic of the East and the West and the history. And there's just, an exotic kind of romanticism. And there's so much there that I felt was captured in that shoot. It was really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, we went to Cappadocia, which I don't know if you've been there, but
crazy beautiful.
So beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is epic. Well, I have to tell you, this conversation has been epic. I could talk to you for many, many hours, and I hope we get a chance to continue it at some point in the future. Absolutely. It's been so good to go a little deeper with you and get to know you. And thank you for sharing like all of your just brilliance around creativity and how we think about the inner work and the journey it can take us on and what it can unleash and how you've done it across so many mediums and in so many beautiful ways. So where can people find you now that they're like all about Nick Onken and what you're doing? how can the Rebel Souls follow you?
At Nick Onken on Instagram is probably the primary space. You can get to everything from there. Onken.co is my main website for just kind of overall blog and podcast and all that stuff. So keep it simple. Nick Onken.
Keep it simple. I love it. And Onken Hats at Onken Hats. I just have to do a plug for that because I follow you there as well. And it's just so fun to see the new creations that are coming out. So for my fellow Rebel Souls who are hat enthusiasts, that's an awesome place to go. Yeah. Thank you for taking this time and just, settling in, dropping in and going deep with me. And you shared so many great recommendations that we'll make sure are in the show notes and things that I want to read and listen to right away. So please also shoot me that Richard Rudd album. That sounds amazing.
Yes, I will. Thank you. Thanks
amazing.
For having me.
Yeah, thank you. And Rebel Souls, thanks for tuning in. This was a juicy one. So I hope you guys got what you needed out of this episode, and we will see you again next week. Bye. Hey, Rebel. Thanks for listening. If you were inspired by what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review so our fellow Rebel Souls can find us. We have big work to do together. And if you want to dive deeper, head on over to my website at soulbatical.com and follow me at Soulbatical on Instagram. Until next time, stay bold, brave, and badass, and never stop asking, what am I rebelling for?